Somewhere between 2 million and 500,000 years ago, something happened to the human brain that shouldn't have been possible. It nearly tripled in size in a fraction of the time evolution normally needs for that kind of change. And the leading explanation isn't about intelligence or tools or language, it's about fire. You probably think cooking started because raw food tasted bad, or because fire happened to be sitting there and someone got curious. Except that's not the reason. Cooking didn't start as a lifestyle choice, it started as a biological necessity. And once you see why, you'll never look at a stove the same way again. Let's start with the raw diet, because that's where this story actually begins. Chimpanzees, our closest living relatives, spend somewhere between 6 and 8 hours a day just chewing. Not hunting, not resting. Chewing. Raw plants and raw meat are dense, fibrous, and hard to break down. Your gut has to work overtime to extract even a modest amount of energy from them. And that's the problem early humans were up against roughly 2 million years ago. Their bodies were changing, their brains were growing, and growing a brain is expensive. Brain tissue burns through roughly 20 times more energy than muscle tissue at rest. So the question becomes obvious once you frame it that way. How do you fund an organ that expensive on a diet that inefficient? The math doesn't work, not without something changing first. In 1999, a primatologist named Richard Wrangham proposed an answer that most researchers hadn't taken seriously before. He argued that cooking wasn't a side effect of human evolution, it was the trigger. His theory, now known as the cooking hypothesis, says that heat-processed food unlocks dramatically more calories than raw food, and that extra energy is what funded the brain's expansion. This wasn't a guess. Wrangham and his team tested it directly. They fed groups of mice identical meals, some raw, some cooked, and tracked body weight over time. The mice eating cooked food gained significantly more weight from the exact same ingredients. Same food, same calories on paper, different outcome once heat entered the equation. Here's why. Cooking breaks down cell walls in plants and denatures proteins in meat, which means your gut doesn't have to do nearly as much work to access the energy inside. Raw carrots, for example, give up around half their caloric value during digestion. Cooked carrots give up nearly all of it. Multiply that difference across every meal, every day, for hundreds of thousands of years, and you're looking at a fundamental shift in how much fuel a human body has available to spend. And the brain, being the most expensive organ we have, was first in line to spend it. So, when did this actually start? That's where the evidence gets harder to pin down. Controlled fire use goes back at least 1 million years at a site called Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, where archaeologists found ash and burned bone deep inside the cave, too far in for a wildfire to have reached naturally. Some researchers push the timeline even earlier. At Kubifora in Kenya, patches of reddened, oxidized sediment dating back roughly 1.5 million years have been interpreted as possible hearths, though the evidence there is debated since natural brush fires can leave similar traces. But Wrangham's theory points earlier still, closer to 1.8 million years ago, right around when Homo erectus shows up in the fossil record. And Homo erectus had a body built differently than anything before it. Smaller teeth, a smaller gut, ribs shaped for a narrower torso, no longer built to house the massive fermentation chamber a raw food gut requires. Every one of those changes points to a species that no longer needed to process large volumes of raw, fibrous food, because something else was doing part of that work before the food ever reached their mouth. That's the part that should stop you for a second, because it means fire wasn't just warmth or protection anymore. It had become an external stomach. Cooking was digestion happening outside the body, and once that shift occurred, evolution responded by shrinking the parts of us that used to handle it internally. We didn't just start eating differently. Our bodies restructured around the assumption that food would arrive already broken down. And that energy had to go somewhere. It went to the brain. Between Homo erectus and modern humans, brain size increased by roughly 200%. That kind of jump on that raw food energy budget doesn't add up, but on a cooked food energy budget, it does. Some researchers estimate that cooking effectively increased the usable calories from a meal by 30% or more, and that surplus is exactly the kind of budget increase you'd need to grow an organ that expensive that fast. A 2016 study led by biologist Rachel Carmody put this to the test even more directly, showing that mice fed cooked meat and cooked starch not only gained more weight, but showed measurable differences in gut microbiome composition within days. Evidence that the raw to cooked shift changes the body almost immediately, not just over evolutionary time. But there's something underneath the biology that matters just as much. Cooking didn't just change what happened inside the body, it changed what happened around the fire. A raw meal can be eaten alone, walking, on the move, whenever you find it. A cooked meal can't. Cooking takes time. It requires someone to gather fuel, tend a flame, wait. And waiting together at a fixed point, at a predictable time of day, is not something our ancestors were doing before this. It created something that hadn't really existed yet. A reason to sit still in the same place with other people on a schedule. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer groups have noticed this pattern repeatedly. The fire isn't just where food gets made, it's where the group actually becomes a group. Roles start to form around it. Someone tends the flame, someone prepares the food, someone else finishes the tools they didn't have time to finish during the day. Cooking created a shared appointment, and shared appointments are one of the earliest possible foundations of what we'd eventually call culture. There's also a colder, more practical layer to this. Cooking kills pathogens. Raw meat carries parasites and bacteria that cooked meat doesn't, which means every cooked meal was also a small act of risk reduction, repeated daily for hundreds of thousands of years. A species that cooked consistently was a species that got sick less often, recovered faster, and lived slightly longer on average. None of that shows up dramatically in a single generation, but stretched across 1,000,000 years, small survival advantages compound into something enormous. Think about what that actually means for a second. Right now, when you throw something in a pan, you're not thinking about digestion or brain energy budgets or gut bacteria, you're just hungry. But your body is still running on the exact same assumption it developed nearly 2,000,000 years ago that food will show up already partly broken down, because for almost the entire history of our species, it always has. So here's the full shape of it. Around 2,000,000 years ago, a species with a raw food body plan started running into an energy ceiling it couldn't push past. Somewhere in that window, controlled fire entered the picture, and food that used to take hours to digest suddenly took a fraction of that. The body responded by shrinking the organs built for raw digestion. The extra energy that used to go there got redirected upward into a brain that kept getting more expensive to run. And the fire that made all of that possible also became the first fixed point in human life, the place a group returned to every single day, which is arguably where the earliest version of a shared culture began. We didn't start cooking because food tasted better warm. We started cooking because our bodies couldn't afford to keep eating the old way. And once we figured out how to get more out of less, everything downstream changed. Our guts, our brains, our schedules, our need to sit still with other people at the end of the day. Tonight, when you heat something up, you're not just making dinner. You're running a process that rebuilt the human body from the inside out. The fire's gone, but you're still doing exactly what it started.